This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the ultimate website builder no matter what your needs may be.
For myself in my own life, I have faith. I don't know that my concept of the Supreme Being would be the same as anyone in conventional religion. I kind of think of the Supreme Being as the great cosmic engineer. But I certainly believe that in the world we're heading into now, into the new millennium, that the dark side and the good side are going to be at battle. And we have to stay on the good side, or otherwise the evil side will win. And it's just important to put that positive energy out there, and I hope this movie, helps in that.
I think you need a hug.
Whenever it's announced that a movie is getting a sequel decades later, it's no longer really surprising. But back in the 90s, the idea of making a follow-up to an iconic movie, especially a comedy nearly 20 years later, was a very novel one. So when it was announced that the Blues Brothers would be getting a sequel 18 years later, the universal consensus seemed to be,
what's the point?
Unlike a belated sequel like The Odd Couple 2, which at least brought back the two stars who had made the original so iconic, the mere suggestion of making a Blues Brothers 2 seems sacrilegious, given that one half of the Blues Brothers had sadly passed away just 2 years after the first movie.
I guess you're really up shit creek.
Again, this is something that doesn't really matter today, as the absence of cast members can be used to enhance the emotional stakes of sequels. But at the time, the idea of making a Blues Brothers movie without one of the Blues Brothers seemed kind of pointless.
But they're wrong!
It would be hard to convince him of that.
He's right, Buster.
And John Belushi's absence wasn't even the most curious aspect of the sequel.
Run away!
As unlike the R-rated original, this movie would be geared more towards a younger audience, boasting a PG-13 rating, and even introducing a child blues brother into the mix.
It's full.
Along with a series of bizarre kid-centric tie-ins, including toys and a video game.
The Lord works in mysterious ways.
And that's before you factor in all of the fantasy sequences introduced into the story this time around.
Wonderful.
While the first movie had some whimsical aspects to it, this time they were dialed up to the extreme, culminating in a battle with an evil voodoo queen.
She's a 130-year-old voodoo witch who eats people.
Last but not least was a confusingly bad title, considering the movie didn't even come out in the year 2000.
And thus, quite lame. Oh.
But I'm embarrassed to admit that I absolutely loved this movie as a kid. I think I even saw it more times than the original growing up, which in my defense was simply a result of it always being on TV.
It's great. Feel much better.
When I got a bit older and discovered the original, I was able to see just how much the sequel paled in comparison.
Well, try not to be so negative all the time. Why don't you offer some constructive criticism?
But I'd be lying if I said I still don't have somewhat of a soft spot for this movie. Even when you do compare it to the original, there's still things to enjoy about it. Mainly some impressive stunt work.
Did you hear something?
Nope.
And a truly awesome soundtrack, which gave us one of the coolest musical sequences ever put to film.
The music, man. You know you missed the music.
Well, it's 120 minutes to the end credits. We got a fully loaded soundtrack, half the cast from the first movie, it's PG-13, and there are zombies.
Hit it.
Let's go.
Talk of a Blues Brothers 2 actually began just 1 month after the release of the first film.
Maybe we'll be out there again. Obviously, John and I really love the act, we love the music, and we love all the guys in the band.
While Aykroyd and Belushi were enthused about making a sequel, they were also eager to explore other film projects as a duo, including a dark comedy from the director of Rocky called Neighbors, and other planned collaborations.
Born to party. It's the way I live, babe. Yeah, have a cigar.
Sadly, many of these projects never came to fruition though, as John Belushi tragically passed away in early 1982 at just 33 years old. To combat his grief, Aykroyd threw himself into his work, and he soon emerged as a star in his own right, headlining films like Dr. Detroit. He even retrofitted film projects he had conceived for he and Belushi to star in, with Ghostbusters and Spies Like Us.
This project started a long time ago, just after Blues Brothers, basically. I outlined the story and wrote the first draft. with John Landis in mind as director and Belushi in mind as a co-star.
In the early 90s, Aykroyd invested in the Hard Rock Cafe, forming a friendship with the chain's founder, Isaac Tigret. The two of them partnered on a similar concept, a chain of live music restaurants and clubs to be called House of Blues. Aykroyd credited Isaac with helping him find solace after Belushi's death, and rediscovering his passion for music in the process. To commemorate the opening of the first House of Blues location, Dan donned the shades once more, performing as the Elwood Blues Revue.
Well, obviously, I never thought I'd ever do the Blues Brothers act again when John died, and that was a very painful part of my life. But when I started to play with the band again, after we started the House of Blues company, you know, the nightclubs and that, then I started to think, well, maybe there is another story to be told here.
Dan brought in close friends John Candy and Jim Belushi as investors in this new venture, and they would sometimes also join him on stage at these events. The three of them also performed together to celebrate the start of the Toronto Argonauts football season in 1991, as Candy was then part owner of the team. These performances renewed Aykroyd's interest in a sequel, and he started plotting a follow-up that would revolve around Elwood teaming up with a new blues brother named Z Blues, to be played by Jim Belushi. I can't be certain, but I believe that John Candy's Burton Mercer, the police detective from the first film, was originally intended to be a part of the story as well, perhaps transforming into a blues brother during the movie, as this is a plot element that does appear in Blues Brothers 2000.
Who wants an orange whip? Orange whip? Orange whip? 3 orange whips.
Aykroyd started speaking publicly about his desire to make a sequel in interviews to promote Coneheads in 1993. One of those interviews caught the attention of John Goodman, who was a huge fan of the original film.
Boys, I'd like you to meet my new partner in the act, Mighty Mac.
He sent word to Dan that he would love to be involved in a sequel in any capacity, and his name became attached to the project as early as 1994.
I'd heard a rumor, and these things do float around in Los Angeles, that Danny was maybe working on a sequel, and I called up. I just wanted to do anything, be a cop, be the guy that paints the lines on the highways, a repairman. I'd do anything just to be in the movie, just to be around the band, and because I've been such a fan for so long.
Aykroyd had been impressed by Goodman's singing in 1991's King Ralph, and the two arranged a meeting.
I'd seen, you know, the number in King Ralph, and I'd seen him do some other things, and was well aware of his acting talent and his ability vocally, and he's got some pretty good moves too.
They became fast friends, and Dan brought John Goodman in as an investor for House of Blues. In early 1995, to mark the grand opening of the Chicago location, John put on shades and a black suit, and made his debut in the act, performing alongside Jim Belushi and Dan as a new character named Mighty Mac Blues.
Ladies and gentlemen, the world will now see, for the first time and forever, our third blues brother. Here he is, Mighty Mac Blues.
Goodman and Aykroyd later performed together as the Blues Brothers on an episode of Saturday Night Live, which Goodman was hosting, in March 1995. The warm reception from the audience convinced Dan that it was time to start seriously developing a sequel.
I'm thinking of putting the band back together.
Not long after this performance, it was officially announced that Aykroyd, Goodman, and Jim Belushi would headline the sequel, with John Landis returning to direct.
You know, this movie is really about comedy and much more about Elwood's quest for a family. You know, he's a middle-aged guy now, as opposed to a young hood. He's a middle-aged hood who has this, you know, need for roots.
Dan was so passionate about getting back into the role that he evidently dropped 50 pounds to bring back Elwood's slender frame. While Landis felt Universal would take some convincing, the studio was enthused about the idea of a sequel, as the Blues Brothers brand had become a popular attraction at their theme parks, with lookalikes entertaining guests via live performances.
Well, good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Dr. Jake, and this is my associate, Dr. Elwood.
These are unsophisticated men.
As a digital creator, it's been really important for me to find a website builder that I can rely on to best connect with my audience, which is why I am so excited to be partnering with Squarespace for today's video. I'm sure you're familiar with their name, but are you familiar with just how committed Squarespace is to elevating your brand? Well, let me tell you how. Squarespace provides all the essential tools needed to succeed in launching a website. Whether you're an entrepreneur in need of an online store to sell products, or an independent creative looking to showcase your work, their customizable layouts will help you easily create an online space that feels unique to you and your brand, no matter what your website goals may be. I've used site builders in the past that quickly overwhelm me with their confusing navigation and clunky design, but that hasn't been the case with Squarespace. Through their interactive Blueprint AI, I was guided through a series of expertly crafted colors, fonts, and layouts to choose from, quickly allowing me to achieve my vision. Their user-friendly features also help me seamlessly integrate YouTube videos and audio feeds into those layouts, which is vital to my brand. Other website builders have made this process so complicated, but Squarespace made it so easy to navigate. They also provide a vast library of stock images, which was so helpful in adding variety to my website. Have you been debating launching a website of your own? Well, now is the time. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to www.squarespace.com/hatsoffentertainment, and you'll save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Universal had a stipulation, however, that the movie appeal more to kids and families than adults, requiring not only a PG-13 rating, but also the inclusion of a kid's sidekick for Elwood.
What's with the monkey? That's no monkey. That's my associate, Buster Blues.
Years later, Landis spoke about the experience in an interview with the AV Club. "We wrote what I thought was a terrific script," he said. Then Universal Studios eviscerated it. The first thing they said was it had to be PG, which meant we couldn't use profanity.
Shit.
Which is basically cutting the Blues Brothers' nuts off. Then they said, you have to have a child. The bottom line was, the only way that movie was going to get made was to agree with everything they said.
Sounds like a lot of laughs.
Watching this movie today, it's so clear that the kid's sidekick was not welcomed by the creative team.
Just do me a favor and go away.
As he has no logical place in the story, and they seem to have no idea what to do with the character other than just stick him in the background.
Besides, you don't want to hang around with some over 40 recidivist. Now scram.
At the start of the movie, Elwood visits the nun from the first movie, now Mother Superior, played again by Kathleen Freeman.
You know, I've been jacked around.
Who tasks him with acting as a mentor to the kid, named Buster. Elwood is only supposed to spend 2 hours with Buster, but the character just tags along for the rest of the movie for no real reason.
It's just not fair.
And Elwood never once makes an attempt to bring him back, which causes him to be wanted for kidnapping.
Elwood!
It's almost like Aykroyd and Landis were mocking the studio by intentionally not giving Buster any character development or arc. I think his name is honestly a reference to Buster Keaton, as he barely gets any dialogue either.
The people are dancing, shouting, and swaying, and the house is rocking.
Further conflicts arose when Jim Belushi was presented with a script for a TV drama called Total Security that he fell in love with. The only problem was that the series was scheduled to film at the same time as the movie.
I guess you're really up shit creek. Ow!
And he respectfully backed out of the movie.
I did want him in the movie. In fact, I was very upset that Jimmy couldn't do it. He had a prior commitment to a television show, and I begged him. I said, what are you doing, a TV show? You're going to be the Blues Brothers. Get out of there.
Yeah.
He couldn't get out. He had a commitment. He had a contract. And it's important, to fulfill your obligations and contracts. So we forgave him.
Though Landis and Aykroyd were understanding.
Bye. I understand.
The two of them penned a new draft that introduced another new character, named Cab Blues, the long-lost son of Cab Calloway's Curtis from the first movie, an Illinois State Police commander who learns to embrace his destiny in the film's final act.
This is what I'm supposed to be doing, all of us. Music, song, dance. I mean, after all, that's why the military and the police exist, to protect the artists of the world.
Character actor Joe Morton was cast in the role, as he was not only known for portraying various law enforcement officers in film and TV, but he also had a musical theater background.
Jimmy was to be the Illinois State Police trooper that was reluctant to join the band and that gets sort of co-opted and converted. But he had a serious conflict on the Stephen Bochco show called Total Security, which is no longer on, ironically. And
You are a shithead!
Regardless, I'm honestly glad Jim didn't end up in this movie, as his inclusion would have just continually reminded the audience of his late brother, something the movie does enough of on its own.
Well, I guess he's in a much better place.
Indeed, John Belushi's absence looms large over the movie. The very first shot is a dedication to him, along with Cab Calloway and John Candy. Much like how the first movie begins, this time it's Elwood being released from prison, only there was no one there to greet him.
Did you tell him about Jake? No, sir. I thought you told him.
The audience learns of Jake's passing at the same time as Elwood, though it's handled in a very sincere and tasteful way.
Now quit your silly moping, pull your sorry self together, and snap out of it.
But...
Jake is mentioned occasionally throughout the rest of the movie, but again, it never feels forced, as this was something that these characters would have had to acknowledge. Likewise, I have to respect them for making Elwood's new partner, Mighty Mac, feels so different from Jake.
Mac is a very different character than Jake. Mac is sort of an innocent. You know, he's a bartender in a strip joint and just who wants to sing. And I think he's pretty corrupted by Elwood.
Whereas Jake was sort of a brash, quick-tempered man-child, Mac, originally a bartender at a club Elwood performed at, is more timid and easygoing, just happy to be along for the ride.
Golly, thanks, Mr. Sline.
Let go of me.
Sorry.
Similarly, he adds a great new sound to the band's music as well, as Goodman is a talented vocal performer in his own right.
Now girls, get your game up tight. We're gonna have a wing-ding-doodle tonight.
His casting and performance aids this movie immensely, and he just slips effortlessly into the world and story. Well, what little there is of one.
Follow me?
Sure. The movie is basically a greatest hits collection of the first movie, more of a reunion concert than a proper sequel. It follows a similar roadmap as the original film, with Elwood trying to put the band back together.
You're telling me you don't miss it?
In the original movie, his reasoning for doing so is to raise the money needed to save the orphanage.
We're on a mission from God.
It gives the movie a ticking clock that builds to a tense final act. In this movie, there's not really any motivation or driving force to get the band back together. Beyond that, they're all just bored and feeling stuck in their lives.
For crying out loud. If this is what you're gonna be like to live with, go ahead.
It is great to see the entire band come back for this movie, though.
They're calling out the blood! Elwood, look!
The band once again finds themselves pursued by eccentric ensembles, including a white nationalist militia led by Darrell Hammond, the Russian Mafia, who I'm convinced gave Dan the inspiration for Crystal Head Vodka,
Будешь хлебать водку ихними черепами.
and of course, cops. Lots and lots of cops. Which amounts to a car chase scene that got this movie into the Guinness Book of World Records for the biggest car pileup.
Damn, that's quite a trick!
Reuniting the band is really just an excuse to jump from song to song, against a variety of different backdrops. Each number features a unique song choice, though, as well as an inventive dance choreography that sets every one of these numbers apart from the previous one.
In fact, we've even been called upon on occasion to do a polka.
Ghost Riders in the Sky is by far the best in the movie.
Ghost Riders in the sky.
A haunting rendition of the Western song that features Ghost Rider animatronics, which were brought to life by Ghostbusters effects artist Steve Johnson and his team. The final act of the movie takes place at a Battle of the Bands gig in a Louisiana mansion, inhabited by a voodoo queen named Musette.
The Louisiana witch queen Musette?
Along with her right hand Marco, played by Paul Schaefer.
Queen Musette will receive you now!
Paul was a member of the original Blues Brothers band, but was unable to appear in the first movie, so it's great to see him here.
You must qualify!
He also served as the film's musical director, something he deserves praise for.
The tunes were picked by Danny Aykroyd and John Landis, who are two guys with a lot of knowledge of this era and this genre of music. As I have, but I respect their choices.
The story concludes with the band, including their newly minted brother Cab, competing against the Louisiana Gator Boys, a supergroup made up of actual musicians, such as B.B. King, Isaac Hayes, Eric Clapton, Billy Preston, and many others.
Hey man, don't worry about it. We're gonna smoke them turkeys.
The entire sequence makes it abundantly clear that The Blues Brothers 2000 was never meant to be a typical movie sequel, but rather a tribute to the music and performances in the original movie. following a loose plot as an excuse to bring it all together. It kind of ends up feeling like the cinematic equivalent of Concert for George.
Look at him.
Bunch of wannabe players.
Universal orchestrated a heavy marketing campaign for the movie. John and Dan appeared on Saturday Night Live in character to promote the movie.
That's promotion, isn't it?
And the band would even headline that year's Super Bowl halftime show, where Jim Belushi reunited with Aykroyd and Goodman, along with James Brown and ZZ Top, in a performance that was seen by 87 million people.
No pharmaceutical product could ever equal the rush you get when the band hits that groove.
Universal even commissioned a video game tie-in, also titled Blues Brothers 2000, for N64, which ironically enough faced numerous production delays that forced it to actually be released in the year 2000.
The Lord works in mysterious ways.
The movie, on the other hand, came out in January 1998, during that year's Winter Olympics, landing at the number 4 spot and rapidly dropping over the next 2 weeks. Reviews were mixed, though most critics praised the soundtrack.
It's great. Feel much better.
Revisiting it today, I'm surprised by how much I still enjoy parts of this movie. Perhaps I'm just blinded by childhood nostalgia, but I truly do not find this movie to be as bad as its reputation suggests. It's certainly miles ahead of some of the legacy sequels that have come out more recently, as at least here you can feel that everyone on screen is just happy to be there and making the most of it. It may not come remotely close to reaching the same heights achieved by its predecessor, but honestly, I don't think that was ever the point. If anything, this movie will make you appreciate the Blues Brothers that much more, while still throwing in some enjoyable performances and catchy songs that pay fitting tribute to an all-time classic and dearly missed performer.
I mean, every time I walk into a House of Blues, I look around and go, this is the palace I built for you, why aren't you here? I think he would have liked what we're doing here, because he had such great respect and love for our band and for all the artists that are in the movie and for blues and music. So I think he approves.